just wanted to start with, this is our second Lunch and Learn. We're very excited that this is happening again. Our next Lunch and Learn, I did a survey and got a few responses, is going to be January 12th, because that's a half day for some schools who want to attend as a staff. So January 12th, and we are going to push it to 12:30. That's going to be our new meeting time to accommodate some of our teaching principals. And if people do have an early release day, that seemed to be pretty common time that people could be available. So starting in January, it will start at 12:30. I have that resource report, which is a newsletter I'm putting out about every 2 weeks. The new one will come out on Monday. So in the chat, I'm going to put the link to that. It's just bite-sized resources, so you're not just inundated with tons and tons of resources. But everything will be updated right on that link when things go live. Student conference. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the student conference, but we are registering for the virtual conference, which will be happening in March 7th. And there's an in-person one in May. And I highly, highly encourage that people are signing up for that. So I'm going to put a link for how you could sign up for it, but I'm also going to put links to, there are some question and answer times. So if you want to know more about what to expect, you can join at this time. You can always reach out to me as well. Well, I thought the links were going to drop in there, but they have not. So if you're interested, you can email me. Copied and pasted it in one place, but it didn't do it here. So we do encourage sign up, and sign up for the virtual is by January 8th. So that's before you know it. So again, if you need help with that, just reach out to me. And if you did not attend, or you know of people that did not attend during the December meetings, feel free to just reach out and we can make a time for that. And I might actually offer some more of those meeting times in February as well. So that was just a couple of taking care of some things and some announcements. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan. He is the facilitator of the ambassador program, and Gwyneth, who is another first-year ambassador like myself, to talk about digital citizenship.
Well, thank you so much for your time and for allowing us to come in. Donna, thanks for coordinating everything. So today's session is going to be common sense education and digital citizenship, how we can create digital leaders. My name is Gwyneth McGuire. I am from RSU 23, that's Old Orchard Beach. I am the librarian and the technology integrationist there, but for the next 2 years, I get to work with your lovely Donna as a MLTI ambassador. And my co-host, or my co-presenter, is the wonderful and marvelous Mr. Warner.
Hi, thank you. That's very kind. I'm Jonathan Warner. For the last 15 years, I've been a classroom teacher. The immediate previous two, I was an MLTI ambassador like Donna and Gwyneth. And at the end of the second year of that, they had the lunatic idea to ask me to stay on, which was very kind. So I now coordinate the program. We have 10 ambassadors physically all over the state available to you, either in person or virtually like today. Delighted to help out with asynchronous resources, with meetings like this, with more formal sessions with your faculty. We have great opportunities to come out to Washington County and visit you. Donna has promised that there are facilities that can house us, which we are very much looking forward to visiting. My role now is to just help the 10 ambassadors get where they need to be to support whatever work you need to do. So I've had the chance to talk with Tim a little bit about how we can support that in as many districts as possible, but the combination of some people being close to Washington County, all of us being available virtually, I really think, and having Donna, of course, in your corner, literally, is an incredibly helpful chance for us to reach out and connect with so many more schools than we have in the past. So we're really excited about that. So thanks for having us today. As Gwyneth said, we'll be talking specifically about the Common Sense Education Digital Citizenship curriculum. I'll talk a little bit about why that's our focus as the way to teach it, or the resources to teach it. But first, we want to talk a little bit about our norms and kind of how we approach conversations about digital citizenship. So I'm going to offer just some keywords to work from, but the most important of them is empathy from my point of view. And that is because I think it's so easy to blame kids for their distraction and to get frustrated with them when they're not on task. And I think so much of modern digital citizenship has to address questions of helping kids figure out how to use technology appropriately, how to limit their use appropriately, how to use it in ways that are exciting and innovative, but not just about the consumption of pre-existing content, and how to make choices that they can live with in the long term. So it's a skill set that they need going forward. And I think it is a combination of their skills that they seem so able and so sort of facile with the devices that makes it easy to think, well, they've got it figured out. And the frustrations we all experience when they're not doing what we would hope or what we're expecting them to do that have really landed me in a place of empathizing with them. And the reason I became so fascinated with the subject was, in fact, my own experience with finding technology incredibly distracting, taking up way too much of my day. I know that's rather ironic for the Maine Learning Technology Initiative ambassador program facilitator to say, but I really was just spending way too much time on things that didn't matter enough to be worth the time I was spending. And so I talked to kids about what that experience was like, coming to realize that my social media use was really unhealthy, that I was far too focused on sort of not being present. There's this wonderful book called Alone Together, where the premise is this time we spend all physically in the same place, but virtually and digitally in other places. So we're sitting around a dinner table, but we're all on our own devices. That sensibility really struck me as one to share with kids and to center that in this place of being empathic to what's happening to them and why they're behaving the way that they are. And then as I thought about that, shaping some other concepts around that. For example, I have down in the lower left-hand corner there the concept of getting rid of a them-us dialogue. It's not about them versus us. It's about us overall, including our understanding of our comfort and our skill set as being some that we need to develop and that they need to develop as well. Really looking at it from a perspective of empowerment and saying to them, you have these opportunities, you have these great ways to use technology to grow and connect and change your world and the world at large. And we can give them those tools, but it's really easy for them to be disempowered if instead our focus is on what we call the digital don'ts. Like, you shouldn't do that, get away from that, that's dangerous. Those are important lessons, but they can't be the only thing that we talk about. So in the upper right-hand corner there, if we think about a difference between punishing a kid for misuse, saying, you made a mistake, you messed it up, and now you're going to be punished, versus a restorative model where we might say, what kind of lesson did you learn, and how might you share that lesson with other schools, or sorry, other students? So we have a district, AOS 91, which is Mount Desert Island, where their restorative justice model now includes when people are making digital mistakes, online mistakes, they create the slides in their lobby for the issue that became a problem. So whether it is inappropriate photo sharing or overuse, distraction, there is now a place in their lobby, it's actually in two lobbies, where digital content the students have created to teach each other about their learning and sort of their discovery, that model has replaced a model, especially for first or second offenses, around punishing them for those digital mistakes. So that kind of pairs the empowerment with that restorative model. Seeing ourselves as co-learners with them, while we have a leadership responsibility, sitting with them to say, like, what can we discover about this together? And then thinking about that us being as broad as possible. That means bringing in community as well. We know that kids go home to different messages than we're giving in school. And if our lessons and our conversations end at the bell, we're going to be a lot less successful than we would be if we were wrapping around to have the conversations continue after the bell rings. So one of the things we'll share today is Common Sense Education has set up some amazing family resources that you can just share out the links. You can have kids talk about it and then send the links home with them. They can be the focus of a parent night or have an activity as part of conferencing, any number of ways that you can get families engaging with the conversations. Even just talking about it is a huge leap forward. And we'll show you a pretty simple example of that a little later on. Finally, not putting any of the responsibility on any one person and not adding to your plates. We fully understand that we cannot, with any kind of straight face, ask you to add something. So we'll talk about ways to embed in your existing curriculum and in your existing structures, places where the conversations can come really naturally. And one of the things I've been incredibly delighted to discover is kids really do want to talk about this across age bands. If you want to start the conversation with them, I had thought at first they'd be like, yeah, you don't understand, you don't know. But if you're willing to really approach it with that empathic model of like, what's that like for you? Here's what's happening for me, or here's what I'm experiencing with my family, or I'm talking about with my family, they are really willing to lean into it in ways that are surprising and wonderful. And if they are talking about it, just that basic change from kind of tacit, silent, acknowledgement that it's there, but not really making it an issue for conversation or worthy of conversation. If you will cross that border and say, this conversation is one we have to be having, let's dig in. It is amazing how receptive they are. And I have time and time again been not just surprised, but delighted by the conversations that emerge.
So we wanted to get an idea of, first of all, who's here, which we see, but if there were more of you, we would like to have a response about on our digital form when you hear or read or reflect upon the term digital citizenship, you think of what? Donna will put that in the chat there. It brings you to our little Google form just so that you have time, and you have 48 seconds now because I took a little longer to talk, but that's what that little timer on the screen is to help you get to that, navigate there, and then put in your choices. There's lots of options of what is that and how does it look, and maybe it's something different than you thought. It's for every person, it has a different perspective, I think. I'm just going to find.
You end up hearing about different things too, based on the age of the students that you're working with, the community that you're in. It's both overwhelming and kind of exciting too, as you begin. This is kind of a great question just to start with faculty. What do you think of when we say the word digital citizenship? What comes to mind?
So we have one answer that came into the chat, just responsible online.
Okay, we'll use that response. That is great. That is a great thing, and that is a good building block, and we'll talk about some of those other answers too as we move through our presentation. So here we are today. Today we're here, and what is the purpose of today, and how are we going to get there? So as we talked about it, we are busy professionals with loads of responsibilities and requirements, dealing with the good, the bad, and the ugly of technology and devices. What is the plan here is to provide guidance and inclusion of digital citizenship concepts and skills into practices and lessons. And we are going to get there not by adding, as Jonathan said, to your already full plate, but helping by showing you where you can find and add digital citizenship concepts and providing you with resources to embed into your current practices. These are our stakeholders. This is the big deal. Some of these players are thinking about and worrying about digital citizenship, while others are completely in the dark or have limited knowledge. But we all have to work together to make progress in order and to help with the digital citizenship issues that we and our students are facing. We really wish there was some magical elixir to solve all the issues, but we don't have that. There's not one thing we can do that will make it go away. But what we do have are tools that can help you navigate these conversations and develop the awareness and skills to become powerful, empathetic digital leaders. So think about that digital world our students inhabit. Let's call it a digital wilderness. This is where 13 to 18-year-olds spend about 9 hours a day consuming entertainment media, and our 8 to 12-year-olds on average spend 6 hours a day. And this is not including the time spent for media for homework or school. This is up 17% since the start of the pandemic. Not only is that more time online in the digital wilderness than spent with teachers, parents, and others adults, but it's also with broad access, unlimited in some cases, access to the world's information. So let's put it another way. When we as educators get a new device or tech, it's often distributed without training, leaving us to figure out how to navigate it while being in the midst of our already complicated professional lives or all the stresses from teaching. Well, we often feel lost. We try to get there the best we can. We work hard, we get frustrated with it. We might use it incorrectly. We might even decide not to use it because what the heck, it's adding stress to me. So I'm just gonna leave it to gather dust. This is what we're doing with our students. When we don't teach digital citizenship, we're putting them in the middle of a very dark forest, if you want the wilderness, with very little help to how to navigate their way through it. We know that digital technology has a rapid pace. It's constantly evolving, making it very difficult to keep up with changes and innovations. Our students have to navigate this wilderness in real time as it expands, which means they'll be left on their own at some point to make decisions around their use of technology and their access to it. How will this turn out? I don't know. We don't know. We're living in a technology experiment, and we need to watch our current generation of young people for signs of what's going on. We don't want to leave them in this digital wilderness where their devices and technology and behaviors are controlling them. It's leading to a lack of agency and empowerment. Where the abandonment in the digital wilderness is not a pedagogical approach. It's the worst thing we can do, but there is a way out. And it is our job to help students navigate this wilderness safely with great skills.
One of my colleagues, I mentioned AOS 91, her name is Kate Meyer, and she was an ambassador for the first 2 years of the program and is now returned to her English classroom. And she gave me the analogy that the way we treat technology sometimes is a little bit like handing second graders War and Peace and saying, good luck with that. I hope it goes well for you. And it's something we would never do, right? As a teacher, we know there's all kinds of problems with that. They need scaffolding. They need the literal skill of how to read the words. They need help understanding the themes and the roles of characters. So if you think about that analogy, we are often making the mistake of thinking of our kids as digital natives. And both Gwyneth and I feel like that term is one we need to toss out the window. They may have skills. They may look like they can navigate it easily. They can swipe and they can click in ways that we are sometimes marveling at how fast they do it. But that is not the same as digital citizenship. That doesn't teach them the skill set that they need to be able to do it appropriately and to do it well. And I think one of the things that really helped crystallize this for me was recognizing that if I was willing to say to my kids, this is a growth area for me, this is something that I have to continue to understand, let's do that together. It's a real discomfort in some ways, but it also gives you a lot of power in the conversation because as you make a mistake, as you make a misstep, it's something that they're seeing and that they're sharing and empathic back with you. So in a way that's sort of different than some of our areas of expertise, I think having this shared opportunity with them can really benefit. The sort of tagline that I've come up with about why we want to teach digital citizenship is because we can't not teach it any longer. And because, and I have your answer here, whatever it is that's bringing you to today's conversation or to any discussions about digital citizenship is the reason we should be having the conversation. If we were working with kids who understood this completely, we wouldn't need to be having this session, right? They would be masters of their world, they would be figuring this out, but we know very well that's not the case. I think one of the things that also has helped me build empathy with them is recognizing that the tech industry has no interest in their well-being. The tech industry is set up to make a profit. So the longer those kids are on their devices, the longer they're engaged with the content, the more money the companies are making. And there's a wonderful book about this called Irresistible, where the author talks about the business of keeping kids focused on keeping their attention focused on the devices. And that's something I can absolutely share with my students from my own point of view, how easy it is to doom scroll to the bottom and then wait for it to load again, scroll again. Coming off of Facebook 2 hours after I got onto it without realizing that much time had passed. Those kind of small stories build so much trust with your students as you talk about your own challenges and your own sort of discoveries. I think, as Gwyneth said, we really wish we had some kind of magic pill, magic elixir to give you a wand to wave. We don't. But what we do have is some amazing guides to help out. We have several people on our team who are delighted to continue this conversation with you, but we also have some national resources, many of them coming from Common Sense Education, that feel like really easy, soft entry points into the conversation that immediately will start to change the way your students perceive it, simply by saying this is a conversation we have to have, and we have to be making it our business to be discussing. For today's purposes, we're going to use a single definition of digital citizenship. If you Google it, you'll find a bajillion different ways that it's defined. And the most important piece of the definition is what it means to you and what it means in your community. Because if it doesn't resonate with you, if the reason that you're having this conversation or wishing you were having more of these conversations isn't embedded in the definition you use, it's going to be really hard to take it seriously and really hard to kind of make it your own. But for the purposes of this conversation, we're going to use one that came from George Couros, who's a fantastic kind of presenter and thinker about the use of technology in the classroom as an opportunity to transform kids' learning. And he says digital citizenship is using the internet and social media in a responsible and ethical way. And in really simple terms, that to me really gives us a lot of leverage, because if we're teaching them those two pieces, that it is responsibility and ethical behavior, we are doing great, great work. But as I said, it's something that needs to resonate for you as well. So if that particular definition, those words don't convey what you think of and what your communities think of, find some that do. The key is really to agree as a group of educators, as a building, as a team, that the message kids are getting is consistent. When we talk about digital citizenship, we mean blank. And Gwyneth and I were talking about this yesterday. She pointed out that one of the key approaches is maybe to just get rid of the word digital, because their lives are so much lived online and offline. There's a lot less distinction between those two things than there might have been for our generation and older people who had digital life enter later on. That concept for our students, especially Generation Z, who were born at the advent of the iPad, they are not seeing that distinction. So as we teach them good skills, as we teach them to be ethical, to be responsible, we are teaching them digital skills as well. But it may help us to really just think about how do we want to show up in the world, whether that's online or in person. As I mentioned, Common Sense Education offers us some really fantastic frameworks to have these conversations. And we're going to share one of these today, but we have links to all of them for you to peruse based on which ones kind of speak to you and which ones feel the most accessible. On the left-hand side, over the last 2 years, Common Sense Education, which is a national organization that emerged from Common Sense Media. So Common Sense Media resources are geared towards parents. Donna was sharing earlier that she used it to help select television shows or video games, even print books, that their resources are fantastic to share with families for family use. But there was so much demand for teachers and educators and schools that they split into two related organizations. And the one we'll focus on today is Common Sense Education. So over the last 2 years, Common Sense Education has focused on aligning their concerns and their questions about digital citizenship with the CASEL standards. So these social emotional standards that are known widely by counselors, by psychologists, people who are social workers, helping kids think about self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. And a few months ago, I had the opportunity to talk to a school counselor who was dying for ways to enter into this conversation in her existing SEL model. And so anyone in your schools that's already using it, these 5 standards have been used as the basis for the conversations about digital citizenship by simply adding the word digital before. So digital self-awareness, digital self-management, digital responsible decision-making. And if you are teaching anything in a social emotional framework, pulling these resources in is very simple. And we've linked at the bottom of the last of these slides, each of these entry points into Common Sense Education's resources. But for those people who are already in a counseling framework, this entry point into the lessons is phenomenal. There's a second entry point, which is the one they've had now for more than 15 years. And it is these 6 threads that look at media balance and well-being. That's one we'll focus on today, just as an example. They have resources related to privacy and security, digital footprint and identity, relationships and communication, cyberbullying, digital drama and hate speech, and news and media literacy. And I use this analogy all the time, and I don't know why I can't come up with another one, so forgive me for those of you that have heard it before. If digital citizenship is a dining room, Common Sense Education builds all kinds of doors to get into that same room. So you might enter a media balance and well-being lesson or activity either by looking at the self-management thread in Common Sense Education's Castle Aligned standards, or the We Find Balance in Our Digital Lives, the green entry point on the right-hand side. They have tagged all of their resources in multiple ways so that as you search for something, you might use 2 different terms, or you might have gotten there from 2 different points of entry, but you'll find the same kinds of resources. As I said, we're going to focus on this first one about media balance and well-being. But as an example of that, we thought we'd start with one of their Teen Voices videos. And a key learning that I've had is that if you can give a little bit of distance to kids between their personal experiences and the subject matter you're talking about related to digital citizenship, the conversations go far better. If you're talking about what Bobby did to Jimmy yesterday online, it is going to completely devolve into a conversation about Bobby and Jimmy and about what happened and everyone we know that was implicated by that. But if you have that exact same conversation, but the subject isn't Bobby and Jimmy, but 2 people who you're introduced to, in this case, through video, it really elevates the conversation and keeps it focused on the digital citizenship issue. So we thought we'd show you this one. We have a link to 10 of them that Common Sense Education has created about 10 different issues that arise for middle school and high school students. And as they're setting up, or as you're watching them, please be aware that there's a question guide that goes with every one of them. So I've had a number of teachers use this with students in their advisory period, their homeroom period, a study hall, where what they want to give is a 10 or 15 minute conversation point, but they don't have a lot of time to prepare for it or to work towards getting ready. As you'll see, when you watch this, you could really just come up with your own questions based on what the teens are saying, but you can also really utilize this very structured series of questions that Common Sense Education provides. And for all of their lessons, there is a scripted plan. If you are not comfortable jumping in, they will give you the exact language to say, and they'll give you 5, 10, 15, or 20-minute timeframes to tell you how long the lesson will take. So you can pull these at any point into a conversation that you have a lull, that you have a moment where an issue has come up that you know you need to discuss. They just work really well as freestanding kind of discussion starters. And then you can continue that conversation for as long or as little as you want. But again, it's gotten the conversation started, and that's the key piece. But if we're not hearing the audio, I wonder if do you need to share with audio instead? You may have to unshare and reshare.
Yeah.
So this list of 10 of these is linked below, and they go across the gamut of sort of various possible topics. This particular one has to do, we'll let you roll back then, has to do with the approach of.
Can you hear it now?
No, we can't for some reason.
Okay, hold on.
I'm hearing
There.
it slightly, so I think you just need to turn yours up maybe, or I don't know.
There, yeah, I agree. I just started hearing. Huh,
Can you hear it now?
no, there.
Oh.
Whatever you just said, started to get louder.
For me personally, the positives of social media are the biggest probably that I feel connected. It's a way for me to talk to my friends at all times.
Brenna, this is gonna sound strange, but can you put your mic near your speaker? It sounds like maybe that's what it
I
is.
don't really wish for the days
There.
when I didn't have my phone because it gives me so much like stuff that I like cherish.
I think I really enjoy social media when I am discussing issues with like-minded people or talking about things I'm very passionate about.
I like to make artwork and write, and so sometimes I'll use that as a platform to display my art. It's fun. I like posting, I like editing pictures. Like, it's just fun to be able to talk to my friends all the time.
Yeah, I never really feel depressed or anything like that, just because there's always somebody to talk to and always somebody that's there for you. That's kind of a good thing about social media.
It has definitely created a pressure for people to like keep on doing it, and I know that it's basically to keep them on the app. The autoplay kind of helps me binge watch because like if I don't get to the remote and click back, then it's just gonna start playing. It is hard to keep track of the episodes and hours when you're binge watching. I think that is definitely part of it.
I only have to wait 3 seconds to see what happens next, so I watched about 10 to 12 episodes in a day one time when I still was home from school, and I finished the first season in one day. I think I've done that twice.
There's been times where I've planned on just watching like one video, but then I've kept watching more because they're recommended, and then it just keeps going, and all of a sudden a ton of time has passed. You know, sometimes when I'm really into the show, but I have something else I need to do, it's very hard to decide if I should click out or not. But it starts playing the next episode, I'm like, oh, it won't hurt, just one more. You find yourself like 2 hours later and you're still watching it and you have homework to get done. I would say that I'm definitely hooked on my phone. I'm very dependent on it is the word I would use. I feel that I'm very aware of this and I'm not very happy about it. Sometimes I wish that social media didn't have as much of an impact on my life. I'll work and then every once in a while I'll be like, okay, I'll take a break, and then I'll go back and check again, and then I'll check for too long, and then I waste a bunch of time that way.
It really makes you feel less whole when you realize you're putting so much energy into something that's on a little box in your hand.
It's something new. It's always exciting. It keeps your attention, and that constant turnover of adding new things definitely contributes to the amount of time people spend on it.
So an example from that you might pose as a question is, what kinds of apps do you use, or what kind of engagements do you have with technology that autoplay the next content? And one of the things I've shared with kids is what we call at my house the Netflix dive. And that is when it's about to autoplay the next episode, who can get to the remote in time to stop it so we don't all get hooked by the next episode starting. Do you guys in your house have something like that you do? Those kind of really just easy entry points. I'll also talk to them about how much more money Netflix started making when it switched from, I would say, remember back in the good old days, you had to affirmatively decide to play the next video. When they changed from that model to the new model, or the newer model, that it autoplays, they doubled their profits almost immediately because people totally fell for it. We are all being targeted in the same way. And it's that kind of empathic approach. Again, we're not talking about Bobby's addiction to his TV show. We're just talking about what these kids have experienced and shared with us. And it's a really nice, simple place to begin that conversation. As I mentioned, Common Sense Education also has pre-scripted lessons. So we're just going to show you what a couple of those aspects might look like to give you a sense of how these conversations might happen. Donna had shared with me that one of the big focal areas for many of you is overuse of technology and getting kids focused back on the work at hand. So you'll see that when we enter we'll all go into the Common Sense Education site together in a few minutes, but there are these strands that I mentioned, and you can sort them out by grade level and by subject. So what I did was click on the green thread, which is media balance and well-being. And then I looked at 3 grade levels, a grade 4 lesson, a grade 7 lesson, and a grade 10 lesson. So you'll notice the titles are quite similar, the focuses are quite similar, but Common Sense Education does a phenomenal job of sort of ramping up or making the questions easier or more complicated, making the tasks easier or more complicated for a student to engage with, just as you might with any kind of literacy curriculum. And the way that it is so searchable makes it very easy to find age-appropriate content in the area you want to talk about. So in this instance, grade 4, my media choices, what makes a healthy media choice? Grade 7, my media use, a challenge. What is your strategy for finding media balance? And that one we'll take on together in just a moment. And then grade 10, social media and how you feel. How does your social media use affect how you feel? So those 3 fairly similar questions, really nicely set up to be leveled for the correct age group. And on this next slide, you'll see that there's a landing page for this grade 7 lesson. So in the upper right-hand corner, just above the photo, you see grade 7. The whole lesson will take 55 minutes. There's also a breakdown of the pieces of the lesson and how much time each part takes. And then where it says lesson slides, they have created a set of slides for every single lesson at every grade level with an accompanying script. And you can take as much or as little of it as you'd like. And they very strongly encourage you to modify any of the slides to better fit the conversation you want to have, to delete ones that don't matter to your conversation, to add ones that you'd like to add. But it is a Google Slide set that is intended to download and modify in any way you'd like as you share it with your classes, along with the accompanying text for any parts of the activities that you'd like to do. If there are handouts, those are linked as well. Everything is set up to share out in Google Classroom, if that's something you use. And the majority of them have, I would say more than half, have a video connected to it. Some of them are the Teen Voices videos you just saw a sample of, but many of them are short videos about other related topics. And again, they're set up to pull that one piece out if you want to. One of the examples I had a conversation about that I thought was brilliant was with a Spanish teacher. And she said, all I did was switch the conversation from what am I going to order at the restaurant to what are you doing with social media? So they're doing the exact same exercise. They're talking in Spanish. They're interacting with each other about the subject of media use as what they're talking about, but the same skill set, developing vocabulary, developing conversational skills. And a math teacher who said to me, I use the data that I collect from my students to teach graphing. So how many hours a day do you spend on this app, and this app? They collect that data as a classroom, and then they do their graphing exercise related to the data that they've collected about their own media use. That kind of really subtle shift makes all the difference because it gets the conversation started, and you'd be amazed where it goes once kids are given the chance to just welcome the discussion or welcome the subject matter into the work of the classroom. And it doesn't require anything other than your decision to make that tweak or that slight shift in what's happening. In these cases, you could pull elements of any of this into a lesson that you're already teaching. I mentioned Kate a little while ago. When she teaches Fahrenheit 451 and all the questions that emerge around government control of the media, she teaches media literacy at the same time using modern examples that she pulls from Common Sense Education. So you'll find that many of the pieces are freestanding, but many of them are also really easy to pull into existing curriculum by just adding a couple sentences about today we're going to use this as the subject of our conversation or the subject of our data. I had a science teacher who used the effects of blue light on the brain as the subject of their study of sort of data-based analyses in a science curriculum, and had this great series of conversations about how the students' brains were being impacted and their eyesight by the blue light that was coming out of their screens. Same lesson, same basic concept, just that tweak in what the focus is. Pulling from this 7th grade lesson, there's a 3-part exercise. And this example begins with a check step. So they ask you to check and take stock of your digital habits, keeping in mind that habits can be both positive and negative, and ask students to brainstorm and list as many of the habits as you can. So you begin with that activity, and then Gwyneth is going to show us the 2 next phases that they pair with that, and they envision this aspect of the activity taking between 5 to 7 minutes.
So then next we're going to have a choose and challenge. So what we'd like to do is go over the prompts. The challenge piece is really looking for you to name what are your digital do's, maybe, or behavior you want to change. And Donna has a link that she's going to put in there for a Padlet where you'll do what is a digital habit that you want to change. And then the challenge, what is this going to be? How do you make this happen? Because it's easy maybe to name a big habit or a bad habit or a good habit or whatever, but what is the challenge? The challenge is often, how do I change that behavior? So I'm just going to bring this over here. You should see in your screen, this is the Padlet that Donna created for us. So, and this is me. What is a digital habit you want to change to do something differently? I find that I'm constantly checking my phone while I'm doing some other activity. So let's say I'm reading or I'm watching TV. Especially when I'm reading, if I hear this message, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that's my kids. I got to look at it. I have this immediacy that I never grew up with. Or if I'm watching TV, I don't have any social media or anything on my phone, but I'll be watching TV and I'll be watching the news and I'll be reading the news. So it's like, what am I doing? I'm not attending to one thing. So I think this habit leads me not to be 100% engaged in an activity or a moment. My challenge that, yes.
Could you just show people how to add so they can do that as you're talking?
Yep,
if
sure.
you haven't used a Padlet before.
This little plus sign up here, and you'll type down here someplace, whatever you want to put in, and then you'll say publish, and the same for the challenge. So feel free to start doing that at any time. So to change my habit, my challenge to change it is I'm going to leave my phone in another room while I'm participating in the activity to be fully engaged. And because it's in another room, or even if it's not in another room, I would put it in a place where I would have to get up to get to it. So that's going to limit my access to it and make it more difficult for me to use it or have that habit. It will allow me to not only engage in the content that I'm with, but it will also help me think about what my choices are, right? So maybe I'll be more conscious of what choices I'm making. Maybe what I'm watching on TV, if I'm watching TV and I'm on my phone, maybe I've got to disconnect there about what is my interest level. So I'll be more purposeful with my choices, perhaps, if I'm doing that. I mean, and it is funny because in my family, I have 3 children. And unlike the rest of the world, if you ask my children, they were the only people who didn't get phones until they were in high school. So because of that, and like Donna, I also used Common Sense Media as a parent to help with selection things for my children. We had certain rules, and one of my rules was no technology at the table, dinner table, no phones or anything. But that's great. And as I look at it, I'm seeing these things like late night use. That's exactly great things to have. And that's also good for us to think about as families or as teachers or things like that when you're talking to your students about their use. Like I'm in a high school and I know that some kids stay up until 3 o'clock in the morning on their devices. And what are they doing? Not really anything. It's not, it's a connection they have, but it's not something that's making a better habit or thing better for them. So I see the great challenges, and we did this anonymously, so no one has to worry about it. Put it in a spot where it can't be reached when I'm in a conversation with people. These are great options. They're really good ways for you to change those habits.
One of the things that I've talked a lot to kids about is behavioral architecture. And what that is making a decision in the present to change your own behavior in the future. So it's like a conversation with your future self about making a better choice. And the example I'll give to kids is that post-it you see on the refrigerator that says, do you really need that soda? How about water? That's behavior architecture to remind you as you're reaching for the fridge, maybe I should do something different and drink water instead of soda. The one that has been my absolute favorite of this was I was sharing with students the idea that it's good, as someone said in the chat here or in the Padlet, to keep it out of reach. And a young woman that I didn't know because she had attended a session that in a school that was not my own, stopped me in a fast food restaurant and was like, "Excuse me, Mr. Werner, I wanted to show you my behavioral architecture." And I thought, oh my gosh, she remembered that term. That was, all I needed to feel my teaching life was complete. But not only that, she turns around, she says, "Unzip this pocket in my backpack." And I thought a little weird, but I opened the zipper and her phone is in the pocket that she can't reach. She said, "My friends and I, when we're walking together, we all put our phones back there. My friends are over there." She pointed to them and they're all waving. And I'm thinking she's crazy for coming to tell me this story, but she has no idea how much it meant to me. And she said, we all talked about it and we thought we're going to be a lot more present for each other if we store it in this little pocket that we can't reach without having to think about it, take our backpack off and grab our phone. And it's really working. So we really appreciate it. I kind of wipe away my tear and I'm like, hey, thanks for telling me that. But it was such a cool reminder that all you need to do is get them talking about it and they're going to come up with the great ideas. So if that term is helpful for you, behavioral architecture, those kinds of choices, I'm seeing several in the challenge section. And it's a great thing to brainstorm with kids, helping them figure out what very slightly different decisions they might make. I listed in my challenge also what many families call a parking lot. So that's just a physical place where the phone goes during, whether it's a meal at night, that we all agree everyone in the family is going to follow that same rule, can work really well as a possibility too.
And I do like the alarm clock one. That's a great one because my kids don't have alarm clocks either. And they think I'm crazy because I leave my phone downstairs at nighttime. So, those little things, those are great options for you. Okay, escape.
And an activity as simple as this, whether it's on Post-it notes, whether it's on the whiteboard in your classroom, take a picture of it and send it back to your families and say, here's what we talked about today. We'd love for you to continue this conversation at home. Those kinds of little shifts are what make the difference. You're not going to make a single decision that's going to move the mountain, but you are going to make little shifts that begin to kind of change the assumption that this is something that they're going to have to figure out on their own. And that little door opening flies open once you begin making that decision.
All right. So we've talked a lot about the Common Sense Media. Now what we're going to do is we're going to have you go there. Donna, thank you for putting that in the link. If you can click the link in the chat, then you will go to Common Sense Media. And we're going to get you to sign up for it's a free account. So there's no strings attached. That's one of the great things about Common Sense Media is that it's free. So you should see something that looks like this. You're going to click that sign in button, and then you're going to get to this Welcome Educators. And you can continue with Google, or you can use your username and password, or you can create a username and password. I haven't signed up for an account unless I specifically didn't, so that you could see the process of how it goes and how it works when you're signing in. So let me just get out of this one. As you see the next slide, this is where you're going to sign in. And if you can say in the chat, oh gosh, I can't get in there, we could do some problem solving for you. But the idea is for you to create an account. So when you have gotten in, if you could just put in the chat that you made an account and you're ready to go to the next step, that'd be great. So as we said before, Donna said she used it, and that's how I first discovered Common Sense Media too, as a parent, probably, I don't know, almost 20 years ago, because my oldest child is 30. And I was looking for, she was a voracious reader, and she was my oldest child, very sensitive, very, I would say, sheltered in a way that other kids weren't. And we moved into this town where kids were reading things like, books that were way above their grade level. And even though they could read above the grade level, the content wouldn't be appropriate for my daughter at that developmental stage she was. So I looked to Common Sense Media to find that on my own. And I was so excited when they made the jump into education and providing resources for educators. So oh, great. You have, Marcia said she's already used the account for some amazing resources this year and last year. That's great to hear. So let's go on. Some of you had a chance to get in there, and we'll go on to the next part. this is Jonathan's account. He's gotten in, but this is what your landing page should be once you get in there.
And
And I'll get my page up there so that we can navigate on there.
perfect. So that's that's a screenshot of what it'll look like. Gwyneth is now going to push us over to the web version so you can see what the interaction looks like. And we're focusing on that green bar across the top. Perfect.
I just want to let you guys know that we have about 6 minutes until 1 to respect the time. So I was just giving you a
Thank
time
you.
warning.
Yep.
Appreciate
Thank you. I've been watching that.
it. So Gwyneth is hovering over the word digital citizenship. And if she slides down to digital citizenship curriculum, the second one there, that'll take you to the landing page I mentioned with the grade levels and the 6 categories. And as you can see, there's one for every grade level, for every subject matter, almost all the way through pre-K through 12. So if she clicks where it says all grades, you can choose the grades you want. So if you could do 4, 7, 10, and then click apply. And then if she clicks media balance and well-being, you'll see the 3, the green one, so just under the grade levels. And you get into any of the individual lessons that we just talked about, like my media choices. You can see the lesson plan there. You can see the slides where it says choices in the upper right-hand corner. And each of those allow you to interact with all this customizable content to break it into smaller pieces. It's all free to use and free to distribute. You'll see that in the slides, there's just a little bar across the bottom that they ask you to keep in so that other people can find the Common Sense Education resources as well. It's all grant funded, and their work is unbelievably helpful to us as educators. And they have made this decision uniformly. There is no paid content anywhere on the site. There's no paywall, no click for cash kind of situation. But if you go back up to the top and under digital citizenship, the digital life dilemmas, those are just like the videos set up to be little fact patterns, little stories, and that right there, explore digital dilemmas. That'll take you to a PDF that shares, I believe it's 15 or 16 short little stories, and then the questions underneath it. So the finding boundaries one, number 1, it's about a paragraph long, and then down just underneath it, you'll see that there's a series of questions and a thinking routine if you'd like to use that. Have students using this, it's called the feelings and options routine. It's linked there, and then it gives you the series of questions. So if you have 5 minutes, 10 minutes, great conversation starter, and they deal with all kinds of different issues. FOMO is the next one there, fear of missing out, things with tech addiction, inappropriate use of technology, cyberbullying, all those kinds of major hot button issues come up in the digital dilemmas. And then finally, back on that page, I mentioned the family resources. If Gwyneth goes to where it says family tech planners, this is intended to share with families by educators, to be shared with families by educators. They're divided into 3 grade bands, ages 2 to 8, ages 9 to 12, and ages 13 plus. So if you could look at the 9-12 tech planner, this is ages 9 to 12, not grades. They ask you to have the children's names. And then at the bottom there, what I love, the family expectations about what everyone is going to do and how we're going to think about being safe and kind and healthy using this. So you've started this conversation at home, you've sent, at school, you've sent this home to continue it, and you're really building on that idea of the community of learning, everyone kind of connecting. But if we go back to the slides, the last slide that we've shared today is a resource slide, which links to everything we've shown you. There are links in each of the slides as well that you're absolutely welcome to use. So the curriculum overview is there at the top, the teacher resources, the digital checkup that we just talked about for families also exists for your classroom. We have a link to the Teen Voices series of videos. And then we've also linked to a couple of outside sources in case you'd like to explore a little more in depth. ACTM, which is our State Association for Computer Technology Educators of Maine, has a national organization called ISTE, and they have some really good resources around the idea of a digital citizenship commitment. They call that DigCit Commit, and a really great, just quick video for teachers called It's About the Do's and Not the Don'ts, really just focusing on how important it is to talk about the opportunities that are presented instead of just the dangers or the challenges. So in this last slide, I just returned us to our vocabulary. Donna is a great resource for this, and both Gwyneth and my contact information is in the slides. As she said, we want to be respectful of time and let people head out if they need to, but Gwyneth and I are both happy to stay and continue to answer any questions you have, refer you to any resources that we can, or let us know that you'd like to talk later, and be happy to do that as well. Thank you
I
again.
just dropped a link to in the chat that is all the different links compiled into a Google Doc of the stuff that I've been putting into the chat throughout the meeting.
Awesome. We really appreciate everyone coming. And as I said, Gwyneth and I are happy to stay for a few minutes if anyone has questions they want to follow up, but also don't hesitate to step out. Have a wonderful weekend, and we look forward to talking further with any questions that arise.
Yes, thank you very much for your time today. Hopefully you had some, got some good information, and we appreciate you participating and being part of our, online virtual